Hey folks, welcome back to our Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at The Last Aurora. The Last Aurora is brought to you by Pendragon Games Studios. It's for 2 to 4 players, ages 13 and up, and games range anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. Radioactive dust has left the northern countries in a complete icy wasteland. Now supplies from the old world completely exhausted, and travel to the south far too dangerous. A new radio message of hope has been heard. The last Aurora, the last icebreaker, is moving along the coast looking for survivors. Winter is coming, and in a few days, those who do not make it out in time will be trapped in the ice forever. It's a race against time. It's a race for survival. Will you make it out in time, or will you be left behind? All right, let's take a quick look at the setup. You're going to lay out this main board, and on the main board, there are waypoints. These are randomized each time you play, face down, shuffle them up, place them out on the board in the appropriate spots. And then you have the Aurora, the last Aurora. You'll put it at its start position at 1, and you'll set up the exploration deck. Now, based on the player count, will determine how you set up this deck, as well as sorting the loot deck and preparing the objects deck. Then from the starter deck, donated by the S on the back of the card, you'll find the 2 rusty containers and place them in the first 2 exploration zones. The next 3 exploration zones all get populated from the exploration deck. And some of the cards that come out in the exploration zone might require tokens, things like fuel, things like food, or there might be hazards like radiation. And so each player receives a player board. At the top, it outlines exactly what the different phases of each round are, and it has places exhausted zone for your survivors that you're using and activating. You have a rest zone for where they go right before they come back to the active zone, and then you have the truck zone where you'll have your convoy. And then you get tokens that you'll be placing on the target zones and in the fame track, starting in the 0 position, or the second position, I guess, that doesn't have any stars on it. Also at the bottom of your player board is a spot for your object cards. You can ever only have 3 of these cards. They'll be placed here. And then you're going to, from the starting deck, you're going to receive survivors of your color and your convoy. So you'll put those in the active zone for the survivors, and then in the truck zone, you'll be placing your truck and your first container, as well as you're going to get some supplies to start. You're going to represent your 2 survivors by the little black meeples here and put them in the truck. And then for resources, you have fuel, ammo, and food. And just a couple other things worth mentioning for setup is that you have your various tokens. You have damage, you have radioactive tokens, you have the various resource tokens, as well as additional meeples for survivors. And then you have the outcome deck. Outcome deck is directly related to when you're battling it out with terrible people trying to stop you from making your way to the last Aurora. This is how you move through battles without needing dice rolls. It's all in the card play. Now, each round of the game is divided into 5 phases. First, we're going to take a look at the exploration phase. Exploration phase is all about using your survivors in order to acquire more cards for your convoy, perhaps more resources, or more survivors. And there's even awesome weapons to add to your convoy as well. So each zone is broken down into a specific number that you have to meet or beat, but you can use multiple survivors to acquire those cards. So in our case here, we have a leader, which is 3, and can pretty much grab anything out here. But we really want that machine gun in the far zone, and we're going to grab it and add it to our convoy. Now, the other thing is that if you're going for resources, you're not going to get all the resources on a card. You have to choose either the left or right resources in this case. And in this case, they're contaminated, so you would also receive radiation in doing so, but it might be worth it to get those resources you need. Or you're going to be adding rusty containers or some sort of container to the end of your vehicle or your convoy. And your convoy will dictate how much, or the truck will dictate how much you can add to that convoy. So you have to keep a close eye on those icons. You can't overload your convoy. And the thing about using your survivors to do this is that that's going to exhaust them. However, with the leader, it has a special ability. The leader is going to go to the rest zone right away instead of having to recoup a little bit. They rest up pretty well because they are the leader after all. But again, there's all kinds of things that can happen out here in this exploration zone. Enemies can show up and ambush you, which we'll talk about in a bit. But again, this is all about getting more resources, more cards, adding to your convoy, and increasing your footprint so you can move across this landscape without receiving too much damage or needing more survivors to help you on your way. A couple of things about this exploration phase which are nice is that there are secondary actions you can perform. You don't have to, but you can from the zone that you acquired that card from. You can either repair, you can remove radiation from a survivor, or you might gain more resources, but in doing so you may incur damage to your convoy. So all the different zones reflect some different actions that you can perform as well. So these are not required that you do, but they do give you some flexibility of things you might need. Now, also it's important to note that if you do use food, you can increase your survivor's level in order to have them go after a zone. And specifically, if you're going after like this contaminated zone and you have a survivor of 1, well, that would kill the survivor. So you don't want that. So you're going to add food to him so he actually has a fighting chance to get those supplies off the contaminated zone. So there's a lot of good trade-offs and decisions to be made as you're acquiring cards again in this exploration phase. And next we have the rest phase. The rest phase is all about moving survivors from the rest zone to the active zone, and then from the exhausted zone to the rest zone. And you first have the option of feeding a survivor that's in your exhausted zone, moving them quickly to the rest zone so you can get them active for the next go. So it's really all about recouping, resting up your survivors so they're ready to help you out. Next up, we have the movement phase, and this is all about moving your convoy across the map to get to the last Aurora. Along the way, you're going to be running into icons or waypoints that we put out in setup that might contaminate one of your survivors or it might give you supplies. If you do get supplies though, those waypoints come off the map. However, the radiation markers stay there permanently. There's also some shortcuts, and shortcuts are allowed if you have that icon available in your convoy. But you have to have at least one survivor in your convoy to take advantage of movement, and your truck has a movement speed, so you spend 1 fuel and you can move those many spots on the board. If you spend additional fuel, then you can keep moving. And if you have survivors that have special abilities, this may give you even more movement. Or you might have object cards that enhance your movement as well. So these are all things to take into note as you move across this map. Again, it is a race, so you need to get there fast and efficiently and safely as possible. Now we move to the fire phase. If there are any enemies in the exploration zone, they're going after the lead convoy. And whatever that zone that the lead convoy is in, that's the zone they're going to attack. You'll move them above the zone. There are 3 different ones here. There's the valley, the coast, and the bay. You'll move that enemy above the zone, and you'll take a loot card, not looking at the back, and put it next to the enemy. Those loot cards all dictate what the defense value of the enemy is based on the player count in the game. And there is no limit to how many enemies can be in the zone. Then, after the enemy is set up in a zone, you'll activate that ambush ability on the bottom of the card, and every convoy that's in that zone will receive damage, and you'll place damage markers. And now it's time for the players to attack. In turn order, each player can spend 1 ammo cube in order to activate one of their weapons. And these weapons that you're using have different levels. So your basic one is a level 1, but if you've acquired better weapons for your convoy, you might have some pretty nice weapons. But what you're going to do is pull an outcome card. On the back of the outcome card will dictate in a grid what may happen. You have possible of doing 1 or multiple damage. You might miss altogether, or you might do damage and potentially damage your weapon in the process. So there's a lot of different things that can happen here, and it's all determined based on the level of weapon you're using and the outcome card that gets pulled. Now, if you did do damage, you're going to place your target token on the top of the loot card that corresponds with that enemy. There are different targets across the top. There's A, B, C, and D. You'll place it on the first one that isn't used, and then place your damage markers. Now, you're also going to get fame points for doing damage to the enemy. And again, it's about fame points in the end. There's a lot of different ways to get them. We'll look at that in a minute. And so when an enemy is defeated, then you're still going to use an outcome card. You're going to pull it to determine who wins the main loot. Now, everybody's going to get something, but the big loot is the one you really want. But the card is going to show at the bottom which target is going to receive the main loot. And those who don't, then will get an object card. All those who took place in the battle, that is, and did damage. But if the enemy was not defeated, then they get to attack the players in the zone. And it's going to work very similar to how it did for the players. You're going to pull an outcome card, except on the right side of the card is what the enemies get to do. And it's based on the enemy level. So that will dictate where you follow in the grid and how much damage is done to each of the convoys in that zone. Phase 5 is the end of the round and cleanup. So the first thing we're going to do is check to see if the game has come to an end. Has one player made it across the tundra and made it to the Aurora? Or has the Aurora gone past the point of no return, leaving everyone behind? Either way, you'll end the game and score points. However, if the game has not come to an end, then you'll move the Aurora ever closer to that point of no return. And then you're going to look at the exploration area. If there's more than 3 cards, you're going to refresh this area and kind of cycle some cards out, keeping that fresh for the next round. And your game will continue round after round until either, again, someone reaches the Aurora or the Aurora makes it past the point of no return. And then you're going to calculate fame points. And so the player with the most fame points is going to win. However, there's lots of ways to get fame points in this game. First, the player board. You may have won or lost fame points throughout the game based on things that were happening or damage you did to enemies. And there's even particular items, especially from those loot cards that you may have gotten that will give you really nice fame points. And there's even survivors and cargo and things that give you points as well. And then if you're in the lead convoy and whoever's in the last convoy, you get fame points for every spot between the two of you. And then there are additional fame points based on how the game came to an end. If someone made it to the Aurora, then you're going to calculate a fame point for every survivor you have that has not been contaminated. But if no one made it to the Aurora, then you're going to calculate a fame point for every card in your convoy without damage. And the player with the most fame points is going to win the game. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form. So keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, this game has a lot going for it. I really like how you build out the convoys and this race. It truly is a race across the landscape to get there as fast and efficiently as possible, but still surviving and making it to the end. And it really feels, that time pressure really feels like it's there. But ultimately, folks, if this looks like a game that would be of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it from me, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.